"Sir, there's something under your desk listening to you," the 3-year-old girl whispered softly, then pointed one tiny finger down toward the walnut desk of the Mafia Boss. Adrian Morelli looked up from his files, his fingers freezing between the pages. He bent down on instinct. A few seconds later, his expression changed completely. For a long moment, Adrian Morelli did not move. His body was folded beneath the walnut desk, one knee pressed against the antique rug his grandfather had brought from Sicily 40 years ago. The lamplight above filtered down in a dull amber, catching on the polished wood grain, on the edge of the black leather chair, on the small metallic object that should not have been there. His fingers brushed it first, cold, smooth, deliberately placed. He slid his palm along the underside of the desk and found it precisely where the tiny finger had pointed. A recording device, no larger than a shirt button, taped with black adhesive so fine it disappeared against the dark grain. Angled, he noticed, with almost surgical precision, toward the exact spot where his voice would carry clearest, toward his chair, toward every private word he had spoken in this room for weeks. Adrian peeled it away slowly, as though removing something diseased from a body. He rose. His movements were unhurried, but there was a stillness in his shoulders now that had not been there a minute ago. The stillness of a man who had just understood something he could not yet fully name. He turned the device over in his palm, studied the switch, pressed it once. A faint hiss filled the room. Then a voice. His own voice. "The shipment arrives at the eastern port on Thursday. Tell Matteo to move the crates before sunrise. No paperwork, no trace." Then his own laugh. Then Matteo's low reply. The recording played on for another few seconds before Adrian pressed the button again and silenced it. The room fell back into quiet. Somewhere down the long hallway, a clock chimed the hour. The sound felt very far away. Rosie had not moved. She stood beside the desk, her small hand still clutching the pink crayon, her enormous dark eyes fixed on him without blinking. She did not seem afraid, only patient, the way small children are patient when they have said something true and are waiting for the adult to catch up. Adrian lowered himself slowly until his eyes were level with hers. "When did you see it, little one?" Rosie tilted her head. She thought carefully before answering, the way she always did when she wanted to get the words exactly right. "Yesterday, sir. I came to find my crayon, the red one. It rolled under the door, and what did you see?" "There was a lady in a red dress. She was kneeling right here." Rosie pointed to the spot beneath the desk, exactly where Adrian's hand had just been. "She was very quiet. She did not see me." Adrian's jaw tightened, just once, then relaxed. His face gave away nothing, but inside his chest, something he had believed sealed shut 3 years ago began to move again. Slowly, coldly, he looked at the child in front of him and, for the first time since she had come to live under his roof, he truly saw her. Not the housekeeper's daughter drifting through his hallways with her crayons and quiet feet. Not the small shadow the staff walked past without noticing. He saw a witness, a pair of eyes no one had thought to guard against. "Thank you, Rosie." She nodded, satisfied, as though a great matter had been settled between them. Adrian closed his fingers around the small black device. In his world, the most dangerous enemy never arrived, shouting at the gate. The most dangerous enemy always arrived smiling, wearing the ring you had placed on her finger yourself. Adrian remained kneeling on the floor for another moment after the child had gone. His hand was still curled around the small black device, warm now from his palm. Then he stood, walked to his chair, and lowered himself into it the way an old soldier lowers himself into a familiar seat before a long battle. The office was silent. Outside the tall arched window, the late afternoon light had begun to bruise into copper. A single car passed on the road beyond the wall. Somewhere in the east wing, a maid was closing shutters. Ordinary sounds. Innocent sounds. Adrian opened the drawer to his right and lifted out a slim black laptop that never left this room. He set it on the desk, entered a sequence of numbers only he knew, and waited for the screen to bloom to life. 3 years ago, after Elena's car had been reduced to fire and metal at the corner of Via San Carlo, Adrian had done something no one in his household had ever learned about. Not Matteo, not the guards, not the housekeeper who had been with the Morelli family for 11 years. He had installed a second camera in his study, a private one, wired to no system, connected to no server, feeding only to the drive inside the machine that now hummed softly beneath his fingers. He had told himself, at the time, that it was for security. But in truth, he had installed it because he had stopped believing that safety was something a man could delegate. After Elena, safety was something you kept in your own 2 hands, or lost forever. He pulled up the archive. Yesterday, afternoon. The timestamp marched backward across the screen until his fingers stopped at 15:47. He watched. The study door opened. Vanessa Russo stepped inside. She did not knock. She did not call his name. She turned back toward the hallway, listened for the space of one breath, and then closed the door with the kind of slow care a person uses when they wish not to be heard. She wore red, a silk dress the color of a slow wound. She walked to his desk without hesitation, without the small performance of curiosity a stranger would put on in an unfamiliar room. She moved like someone who had already mapped the space in her mind. She knelt, her hands worked beneath the desk with quick, practiced motions, no fumbling, no searching for the right angle. The movements of someone who had done this before, in other rooms, in other lives. Then she rose, brushed the dust from her knees, and drew her phone from the small clutch at her hip. Adrian raised the laptop volume. Her voice filled the study, calm and low and almost tender, like a woman speaking of dinner reservations. It is done. The device is placed. After the wedding, once he signs the inheritance agreement, the entire Morelli empire will belong to us. He trusts me completely. Then, softer, a laugh, a small, satisfied laugh, the way a person laughs when a long piece of work has finally clicked into place. The recording ended. Adrian closed the laptop very slowly. He did not slam it. He did not curse. He simply lowered the lid the way one might close the door on a room where someone has died. He turned in his chair. Rosie was no longer there. She had left quietly, understanding without being told that some things adults must sit with alone. He unlocked the hidden drawer beneath his desk and placed the recording device inside it, next to a photograph of Elena he had not looked at in 11 months. 3 years of trusting no one, and now this. The cruelty of it was not the betrayal itself. The cruelty was that he had finally, chosen to open the door again, and she had walked through it carrying a knife. A soft knock at the door. Adrian did not answer at once. He straightened his cuffs, ran a hand once across his jaw, and closed the drawer with a quiet click. By the time he said, "Come in," his face had become the face he had worn every evening for the past 8 months, the face of a man in love. The door opened. Vanessa Russo stepped inside. She was wearing white tonight, a long silk dress that moved around her ankles like poured milk, her dark hair loose down her back, unpinned, the way she knew he liked it. The familiar perfume drifted ahead of her into the room, jasmine and something warmer beneath it, something that had once, until this afternoon, made his shoulders soften without his permission. "I missed you," she said, and her voice was low, honeyed, tired in the way a woman is tired at the end of a long day of thinking about the man she loves. "You are working too late again." She crossed the room without waiting for an invitation and lowered herself onto his lap, folding into him the way a cat folds into a chair. Her arms slid around his neck. Her lips brushed the line of his jaw, then the hollow of his throat. Adrian had faced men holding guns and not moved a muscle, but this was harder. He turned his head and met her kiss with a small, tired smile, the smile of a man grateful to be found. His hand rose to the small of her back, resting there with the exact pressure it had always rested with. "Forgive me. There is a great deal to finish before the engagement." "You always say that." She pulled back just enough to study his face. "You have not eaten, have you?" "Not yet." She sighed, and it was so convincing he almost forgot what he had watched an hour ago on the small black screen inside the drawer beneath them. "About next week," she said, tracing the edge of his lapel with one manicured finger. "I have been thinking, after the ceremony, it would be so much simpler if some of the financial files moved to a shared account. Nothing important, just the operational things. It would save you hours every week, my love." Adrian nodded slowly, as though the idea had already occurred to him. "That is a good thought," he said. "We will speak with the lawyers." Her smile widened. Something small and satisfied moved behind her eyes. The same small thing he had heard yesterday afternoon in the tiny speaker of the laptop. Then, for the briefest instant, so brief he might have missed it if he had not been waiting for it, her eyes dropped, down and to the right, toward the underside of the desk, toward the exact spot where the recording device had been. She looked back up almost before the glance had happened. Adrian did not react. He did not blink. He simply lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. She stayed a few minutes longer. She spoke of flowers and of the guest list, of a cousin flying in from Milan. Then she rose, kissed him once more, and left in a soft rush of white silk and jasmine. The door closed. Adrian did not move for 15 minutes. Love and performance, he thought, differ in one place only. A person who loves you asks about your pain. A person who is performing never does. The side door opened without a knock. Only one man in the world used that door. Matteo Ricci stepped inside, closed it behind him, and turned the small brass lock with the ease of habit. He was 45 years old, broad through the shoulders in a way suits could not entirely soften, with the gray creeping in at the temples of a man who had watched too much and slept too little. 15 years, he had stood at Adrian's right hand. 15 years of doors opened without knocks, of orders given without explanation, of trust that had never once been questioned by either of them. He read Adrian's face in the space of 3 seconds and did not speak. Adrian gestured to the chair across the desk. Matteo sat. Adrian opened the hidden drawer, lifted the small black recording device from beside the photograph he had not turned over, and set it between them on the walnut surface. Then he opened the laptop, entered the sequence, and let the recording play. Vanessa's voice filled the room again. The same words, the soft laugh at the end. Matteo did not move while it played. He did not clench his jaw. He did not curse. When it was finished, he sat perfectly still for what felt like a very long time. His eyes went to the desk lamp, then to the photograph on the shelf across the room, then back to Adrian. Finally, in a voice quieter than usual, he said, "Elena, or Vanessa, which one was the real target from the beginning?" The question landed between them like a stone dropped into deep water. Adrian met his eyes. "That," he said, "is what you are going to find out." Matteo nodded once, slowly, as though the answer had settled something ancient in him. Adrian leaned forward. His voice dropped, though there was no one within 30 meters of the room. "3 things, Matteo. Listen to me carefully. First, no confrontation. Not with her. Not with anyone. Whatever you learn, you bring it here first. Second, no changes. My schedule, my meetings, my routines, they stay exactly as they were yesterday. She must believe nothing has shifted. Third, no one else knows. Not the captains, not the guards, not even the men who have bled for me. Only you, only me. Understood? I want to know who she calls. I want to know where the money moves. Every account, every shell, every wire. And I want to know which of my own men she has spoken to. Even the ones who said no. Especially the ones who said no." Matteo did not answer with words. He rose from the chair, walked 2 steps to the space of clear floor before the desk, and lowered himself onto one knee. His right hand pressed flat to his chest. His head bowed. It was the old rite, the old Sicilian oath. It had not been performed in this house since Adrian's father had died. "On the name of Elena Morelli," Matteo said quietly, "I swear it." Adrian did not stop him. He watched the man who had stood at his side through burials and wars and long silent winters, and he understood that some vows were older than either of them. "Rise, brother." Matteo rose. Neither of them spoke of it again. They did not need to. The Morelli family had governed by 3 laws for 4 generations. No drugs, no children, no betrayal of the innocent. Everything that would follow in the coming weeks, every silence, every calculation, every ruthless decision, would grow from that single, unbroken root. Midnight found the house in the kind of silence only very large houses know. The kind of silence made of thick walls and empty hallways and the slow ticking of clocks nobody had listened to in years. Matteo had gone. The guards had rotated. Somewhere on the 3rd floor, a window shutter tapped once against its frame, and then went still. Adrian sat alone in his study. He had not turned on the overhead light. Only the small brass lamp on his desk burned, and its glow reached no further than the edge of the walnut. Beyond that edge, the room dissolved into shadow. The bookshelves and portraits and the tall arched window all softened into shapes without names. He opened the drawer. The photograph was there, where he had placed it earlier that evening. He lifted it out and set it on the desk in front of him, angling it so the lamplight fell across the frame. Elena Morelli, 29 years old in the picture, laughing at something outside the frame, her hair pinned loosely at the nape of her neck, one hand raised as if to shield her eyes from the sun. He had taken the photograph himself, on the terrace of a small hotel in Taormina, 3 months before the wedding, 6 months before the pregnancy that had ended in a hospital corridor, 2 years before the car, 3 years he had refused to let anyone touch his heart, 3 years of walking through this house like a man in a locked coat. He had learned to sleep alone, to eat alone, to grieve in the small, silent way of men who could not afford to be seen grieving. He had believed the door inside him was sealed for good. And then Vanessa, she had arrived exactly when he was most tired. That was what he saw now, in the lamplight, with the taste of her jasmine perfume still faintly on his collar. She had appeared at the charity gala on the one night he had almost not gone. She had spoken to him about Elena without flinching, when everyone else in the city had learned to avoid the name. She had been patient. She had been unhurried. She had never once asked for more than he was ready to give. Too perfect, too precisely timed, the way a locksmith knows exactly which pressure to apply to which pin. He remembered his father, sitting on the stone bench in the vineyard behind the old house. The summer Adrian was 17. A neighbor had borrowed money and vanished. His father had not raised his voice. Money does not change people, Figlio. It only reveals who they were the whole time. Adrian ran his thumb slowly along the edge of the frame. If Vanessa was a piece on a board, Then someone had moved that piece into position long before the engagement, long before the first dinner, long before the first careful conversation about her family's business interests in the north, long before, perhaps, the corner of Via San Carlo. His hand went still. He had told himself for 3 years that Elena's death had been random, a rival striking blind, a message meant for someone else. He had said it aloud so many times that he had come to believe it. Now, for the first time, he allowed the other possibility into the room. He set the photograph down gently, face up, so her laughter still faced the light. There is a loneliness known to abandoned men, and there is another loneliness, deeper and colder, known only to men surrounded by embraces that were never real. Morning came slowly to the Morelli estate. A thin gray light pressed against the tall windows before it turned gold, and the sound of the house waking rose in soft layers, cups against saucers, footsteps on marble, the low murmur of the guards at the gate changing shift. Adrian had not slept. He had shaved, dressed, and now stood at the window of the second-floor landing, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. He was not looking at the garden. He was looking down into the long hallway beneath him. Clara Bennett was crossing it with an armful of clean linen, 34 years old, 2 years in this house, widowed young when her husband, a mechanic named Thomas, had died from a slow illness that had eaten through the family's savings before it had taken him. She never spoke of it. Adrian knew the details only because Matteo had checked, the way Matteo checked everyone who slept beneath this roof. She worked from 6 in the morning until 8 at night. She never asked for a raise. She never complained about the stairs. She had a small, quiet dignity that reminded him, faintly, of the women who had raised him in the vineyard country. And there, at the end of the hallway, in the pool of sunlight beneath the tall arched window, sat her daughter. Rosie was on the floor with her legs folded beneath her, a coloring book open across her knees, the pink crayon in her right hand and a green one held ready in her left. She was humming something without a tune. Adrian watched. A maid passed her carrying a tray. She did not look down. A guard walked the length of the hallway on his morning round. His eyes swept the corridor from end to end and did not once register the child in the sunlight. 2 of the kitchen staff crossed behind her, arguing quietly about the delivery of fish. Neither turned their head. Rosie kept humming. Adrian set his cup down on the sill and did not move for a long moment. He had spent the whole night thinking about the walls of this house, about the cameras, the guards, the shift patterns, the men he trusted, and the men he was no longer sure of. And here, in a single hallway, on a single ordinary morning, he had just seen something none of that money could ever buy. A 3-year-old child could move anywhere in this estate. No one guarded against her. No one watched their words. No one closed a door for her. She was, in the language of his father's old world, invisible. And invisible people, Adrian thought slowly, are the only ones who ever see the truth. He walked downstairs. Clara looked up from her folding and straightened at once. "Sir, good morning." "Sit for a moment, Clara, please." She hesitated, then perched on the edge of the bench by the wall. "How is Rosie sleeping?" he asked. "Well, sir, she is a good sleeper. And you?" Clara gave a small, tired smile that answered the question without words. He asked her a few more things. About her sister in the north. About whether Rosie missed her father. Clara answered simply. Then, almost absently, she said, "Thomas used to tell me, the poor must learn to see first, because they are not permitted to guess wrong." Adrian nodded. The invisible ones, he thought, always see the truth most clearly. The rest of the world only sees what it can afford to. Adrian waited until Clara had returned to the linen closet before he walked down the length of the hallway toward the pool of sunlight where the child was still coloring. Rosie looked up when his shadow fell across her page. She did not stand. She simply lifted her small face, waiting. "Rosie," he said quietly, "would you come to my study for a moment? I have something to show you." She closed her coloring book with the seriousness of a bank clerk closing a ledger, gathered her crayons into their small tin, and stood. She followed him down the hallway without a word, her sandals whispering against the marble. Inside the study, Adrian did something he had not done for another living being in 3 years. He did not sit behind the walnut desk. Instead, he pulled the small footstool from beside the fireplace, set it in the center of the rug, and lowered himself onto it so that his eyes were level with hers. From the drawer he had already prepared, he took out a small notebook, bound in soft violet leather, and a wooden box of new crayons, 24 of them, still in their perfect factory row. He held them out to her. Rosie's eyes went very round. "These are for me?" "They are for a job," Adrian said. "A very important job, but only if you would like it." She considered him carefully, the way she considered everything. Then she nodded once. "Good, then listen." He kept his voice as gentle as he would have kept it for a much older child. "We are going to play a game. You and I. The game is called Little Spy. If you see something strange in the house, someone you do not know, a sound that does not belong, two people talking very softly when they think no one is near, you come and tell me. You tell me only what you saw, or you draw it in this book. You do not guess. You do not add. You do not decide what it means. That is my job. Your job is only to see. Rosie held the violet notebook in both hands as though it were made of glass. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at him, and her small brow gathered into a careful frown. Sir, are you in trouble? Adrian did not answer at once. He wanted to lie to her the way adults always lied to children about difficult. I am trying to find out, he said, who the good people really are. Rosie thought about that. Then she nodded, satisfied. It seemed to her to be a very good reason to play a game. And Rosie, he added, more softly, you must not tell anyone we are playing. Not the maids, not the guards, not even your mother. Because if she worries, the bad people will see it in her face. Do you understand? She held the notebook a little tighter. Like a secret? Like a secret. Between you and me? Between you and me. Rosie considered this with the gravity of a small judge. Then she slid the notebook into the front pocket of her pinafore, tucked the box of crayons under her arm, and stood. I will be a good spy, sir. Adrian watched her walk out of the study. Sometimes, he thought, the strongest ally a man ever finds in his life stands no higher than his hip. Late afternoon. The sun had begun its slow tilt behind the cypresses, and the walls of the study had turned the color of old brass. Adrian was reading a shipping manifest, a pen in one hand, the other resting flat against the walnut, when the small, quick sound of sandals against the marble reached him from the hallway. The door opened without a knock. Only one person in this house was permitted such a thing now. Rosie hurried in, her cheeks flushed pink from running, the violet notebook clutched tight against her chest. She did not speak at once. She stopped just inside the door, remembered herself, closed it carefully behind her, the way he had shown her, and only then crossed the rug to the edge of the desk. Adrian set the pen down. Tell me what you saw, little one. She placed the notebook on the corner of the desk and opened it with both hands, turning the pages until she found the one she wanted. But before she showed him the drawing, she wanted to tell it in her own words. He could see it in the way her lips pressed together, the way her small chest rose with the importance of the report. In the rose garden, sir. Just now. Who was there? Miss Vanessa. And a man. What kind of man? Tall. Very tall. Taller than you. White hair. All white, like flour. She used both hands to sketch the height in the air. He wore a long black coat. Even though it is warm. Adrian nodded slowly, encouraging nothing, guiding nothing. They stood by the white roses. He gave her something. What did he give her? An envelope. Brown paper. Not thin. Fat. Like this. She held up her thumb and forefinger to show the thickness. She put it in her purse very fast. Did they speak? Only a little. I could not hear the words. But at the end, she said one word to him. Rosie paused, uncertain now, as though she wanted very much to get this exactly right. She said, Papa. Adrian did not move. He did not let his face change. But inside his chest, something very cold and very still shifted into place, the way a heavy door swings on a well-oiled hinge. Papa. Dante Russo. The head of the Russo family. The old rival his father had fought in the streets of the old quarter 30 years ago. The man the entire underworld had believed had accepted peace with the Morellis last spring, when the two houses had signed a truce at a long table in a quiet villa outside the city. Adrian had shaken that man's hand himself. Show me the drawing, Rosie. She turned the notebook toward him. She had drawn the man in crayon, careful and slow, the way a small child draws when she wants to be believed. The white hair, the long black coat down past the knees, the tall, thin figure. And on his right hand, on the smallest finger, she had drawn a large ring, and inside the ring she had drawn a shape she could not have known the meaning of. A coiled serpent. Adrian looked at the ring for a long time. The Russo family crest, worn only by blood, worn only by Dante himself, and by the son he had buried 8 years ago. Old enemies never truly leave, Adrian thought. They only change the way they walk through your door. 3 days passed. Adrian moved through them the way a man moves through a minefield, each footfall measured, his face unchanged. He signed papers, he took meetings, he kissed Vanessa on the cheek at breakfast, and once, at her insistence, at the doorway before she left for a fitting. He said nothing that could not have been said the week before. He did not touch the walnut desk after dark. On the third evening, the side door of the study opened again without a knock. Matteo stepped inside carrying a leather folder that had been thin the last time Adrian had seen it. It was thick now, the straps strained against the buckle. He set it on the desk and did not sit. Read it in your own time, or listen while I speak, whichever you prefer. Speak, Adrian said, Matteo opened the folder. His voice remained flat. The voice of a man reading a report he had chosen not to feel. 4 meetings between Vanessa Russo and Dante Russo in the past 2 months. All 4 in the rose garden of this estate. All 4 on days you were away from the city. Wednesday, the 11th of last month, the 23rd, the 2nd of this month, and the 8th. She met him for an average of 22 minutes each time. She always arrived from the east door. He always left through the service gate on foot. Adrian did not move. An offshore account in Cyprus, opened in her mother's maiden name, has received $2 million every month for the past 7 months. The money is routed through 3 shell companies and returns, cleaned, to a holding firm registered to a nephew of Dante's in Malta. It is his money. He is paying her, or paying her through her. Continue. 3 of your mid-level captains have been approached privately by Dante's people. Falcone, Serrano, Vitali. None have agreed. All 3 still believe you do not know. Falcone reported the approach to me last month, and I told him to keep quiet and let them keep asking. He has been feeding me their questions. Adrian gave the smallest nod. Matteo did not go on immediately. He closed the folder, then opened it again to a single sheet at the back. He set that sheet on the desk and turned it so Adrian could read. There is one more thing. I would rather not tell you sitting down, so I am telling you standing. Adrian looked at the sheet. It was a hotel registry. 6 months. 6 months before the corner of Via San Carlo. 6 months before the fire and the twisted metal and the closed casket at the church on the hill. Vanessa Russo had been in this city, under a different name, staying 2 blocks from the office of Elena's lawyer. Adrian closed his eyes. The room did not spin. His breath did not shorten. Nothing so simple as that. There was only a slow, cold arrival of something he had already half known, walking at last into the light. Matteo waited. Then, very quietly, "Do we move tonight?" Adrian opened his eyes. "No, sir. They want a wedding, Matteo. We will give them a wedding. On our terms, in our room, with our music." Matteo closed the folder. The distance between suspicion and proof, Adrian thought, is the distance between feeling and victory. Only one of the two ever wins a war. Vanessa's villa sat on the hill above the old orchard, a low white house with tall shutters and a terrace that overlooked the sea. She had insisted on the evening a week earlier. Before any of this, Adrian had accepted then. He accepted again now. He arrived just after 8. The front door opened before he could knock. She stood in the doorway in a dress the color of dark wine, barefoot, her hair swept up in a way she rarely wore it. Behind her, candles burned on every surface. A small speaker in the corner played soft Italian jazz, the kind his father used to hum while trimming the vines. "Come in, my love. You are exactly on time." He kissed her on both cheeks. She smelled of jasmine and, underneath it, of something warmer, unfamiliar, rosemary, olive oil. She had been cooking. Adrian let his surprise show, because a man who had not spent 3 days reading a folder of proof would have shown it. "You are cooking?" She laughed, delighted with herself. I know. Do not faint on the doorstep." She led him to the dining room, a single long table set for 2. Wine already breathing in the decanter. A dish of ossobuco on the sideboard, steaming faintly. Adrian recognized the scent of his mother's recipe. "How did you find this?" he asked, quiet. "Your aunt in Palermo. I called her 3 weeks ago. I told her I wanted to surprise you." He smiled the smile he had been practicing. He sat. He let her pour the wine. He raised the glass to her and drank. They ate slowly. She talked of Amalfi, of a hotel she had chosen for the honeymoon, of the small chapel on the cliff where she wanted them to visit. She talked of the wedding flowers, of an aunt flying in from Verona, of a song she wanted played during their first dance. Adrian listened. He asked the right questions in the right places. He touched her wrist across the table when the moment called for it. Then, over the second glass of wine, she set her fork down and leaned slightly forward. "My love, after the wedding, I want us to simplify things. The management structure. It has become too heavy for one man to carry, even a man like you. I would like to bring in some of my people, a financial advisor I trust, a logistics coordinator, 2 men from my family's operation who could ease the burden on Matteo." Adrian nodded slowly, thoughtfully, as though weighing a genuine proposal. "I have been thinking the same thing," he said. He reached across the table and took her hand. "You always see clearly, Kara." She smiled, and the smile reached everywhere except the corners of her eyes. Then, softer, she asked, "Do you trust me, Adrian?" He looked at her, truly looked, for what felt like the first time. The dark eyes he had once believed were warm, the perfect stillness of her face, the absence of any tremor, any doubt, any small flicker of the guilt a person would feel if they knew what they were doing. Yes, he said, I do. She laughed, low and pleased, and lifted her wineglass. That was when he understood the last piece. She did not see herself as a traitor. In her own mind, this was strategy, this was winning, that was the most dangerous kind of enemy of all. A person who believes they are right while doing something evil is a person you must never wait for to feel regret. The next day at noon, Adrian was standing at the window of his study, watching a gardener trim the hedges along the south wall. The house felt ordinary. A pot clanged in the kitchen. A telephone rang somewhere on the ground floor. Sunlight fell in long yellow bars across the marble. Then the door burst open. Rosie did not walk in. She ran. Her small sandals slapped against the floor, her cheeks pale, her breath quick. The violet notebook pressed so tight against her chest that her knuckles had gone white. Sir. Sir. Adrian turned from the window at once. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt in front of her. Slow down, little one. Breathe first. She tried. Her chest rose and fell twice. Then the words came out in a small tumble. The white hair man. He is upstairs. Adrian's hand, which had been resting lightly on her shoulder, did not tighten. He kept his voice even. Upstairs where? Rosie? The 2nd floor? The long hallway? The one where the maids do not go? The private wing? Only 2 men in this house were permitted on the 2nd floor hallway that ran the length of the east side. Adrian and Matteo. Not the guards, not the staff, not the accountants. Not even Vanessa had ever set foot in that corridor. Was he alone? No, sir. Miss Vanessa was with him. Where were they standing? In front of the black door. The one with no handle on the outside. The vault room. Adrian's breath went very still, but only inside. On the outside, his face was the same face it had been at the window a moment before. Did they see you? Rosie shook her head. I was behind the tall vase, the blue one with the birds. I was very quiet, like a spy. Good girl. What did they say? She frowned, closing her eyes the way small children close their eyes when they are trying to see something again from memory. Her small mouth moved silently. Then she opened her eyes. I could not hear all of it. They spoke very soft. But I heard 3 things. I remembered them so I could tell you. Tell me exactly. The lady said the key to the safe, and later she said the engagement night, and the man said the ones who will not be coming back. Adrian did not move for a long moment. The ones who will not be coming back. He kept his hand steady on her shoulder. He did not let it tremble, because a 3-year-old should never learn that a grown man can tremble. But inside him, the cold that had settled slowly over the past week arrived at last in its final shape. This was not a takeover. This was a slaughter. Dante Russo had walked through the 2nd floor corridor of the Morelli estate, past guards who had said nothing, past cameras that had recorded nothing, past every layer of protection that Adrian had built with his own hands, which meant that at least one man in his own security detail had chosen a side. Adrian straightened. He kissed the top of Rosie's head, gently, once. Then he reached for the intercom on the desk and called for Matteo. The most dangerous traitor is not the man who hates you. It is the man to whom you once gave a debt he never forgave you for owing him. Matteo arrived within 9 minutes. He did not speak until the door was closed and locked behind him. Adrian was already standing at the desk, the violet notebook set carefully off to one side, out of reach of what came next. There is a file, Matteo said. I pulled it from her mail server yesterday. It was encrypted 3 ways. I broke the last layer this morning. He set a slim black flash drive on the walnut and pushed it toward Adrian with 2 fingers. Adrian did not touch it. Read it to me first. Matteo unfolded a printed sheet from inside his jacket. He held it in both hands, the way a man holds a document he wishes did not exist. Then, in the same flat voice he had used to deliver the folder 3 nights ago, he read, It is a list of 5 names. Attached to a document titled Engagement Night, Phase 2. Beside each name is a method and a location. All 5 are to be, and I quote, removed, within the first 90 minutes after you sign the inheritance agreement. He turned the sheet and set it on the desk before Adrian. Adrian looked down. He read the names slowly. He had known each of these men for years. Some he had known since boyhood. Falcone, who had once carried a bullet, meant for Adrian's father out of a warehouse on his own back. Serrano, whose wife had baked bread for the Morelli kitchen every Christmas for 15 years. Vitali, old Gennaro, who had taught Adrian to drive at the age of 10 in an empty vineyard. And the second name on the list, written in the same neat black type as the others, was Matteo Ricci. Adrian raised his eyes. Matteo was watching him quietly. His right hand had gone, without his noticing, to the thin gold ring on his left. He turned it once around his finger. His wife had been dead for 8 years. He had never taken it off. He smiled, small and dry. An honor, sir. To stand second on the list, the first name must be yours. Adrian shook his head slowly. No, brother. My name is at the top of another page. He turned the sheet over. There was a second document behind it, shorter, colder, marked Phase 3. Adrian Morelli, honeymoon accident. Method to be finalized on arrival in Amalfi. Coastline road preferred. Vehicle to be arranged locally through R. Matteo said nothing for a long moment. Then, quietly, so she wanted the ceremony, she wanted the signature, and she wanted the cliff. Yes. Adrian folded both sheets in half, then in quarters, with the same slow precision he used when folding the tricolor at his father's grave every October. He placed them inside the drawer beneath the desk, on top of the small black recording device, next to the photograph of Elena. He closed the drawer. He locked it. Then he looked up at Matteo. Let the wedding come. Matteo did not ask why. He understood already. You will not sign, he said. I will do far more than not sign. I will let them believe I have signed. I will let them raise their glasses. I will let them walk into the room where they think they will kill us. And then the room will belong to us. Matteo nodded once. There is a moment, Adrian thought, when a man learns the exact date of his own death. In that moment, he does one of two things. He collapses inside himself, or he becomes the most dangerous person in every room he enters. The choice is never given twice. Evening, Matteo had gone to prepare the first quiet meetings. The lists had been folded away. The doors of the study had been locked and unlocked and locked again, and Adrian had walked out of that room the way a soldier walks out of a war tent, carrying nothing on his face. He was crossing the long hallway toward the west stairs when he saw her. Rosie was seated on the floor at the far end, near the tall window where the sunset was pouring in the color of ripe apricot. Her legs were folded under her. Her violet notebook lay open across her knees. Around her, on the marble, was a small ring of crayons in an order only she understood. Adrian slowed. He watched her draw for a moment before he approached. She was working on a house, a large house with tall walls and many windows. The windows were yellow, glowing yellow, the kind of yellow that meant the lamps were lit inside, and someone was home. In the doorway of the house, she had drawn 3 figures, a tall man, a woman, a small child holding both their hands. Adrian lowered himself to the marble beside her. She did not startle. She simply moved her crayons a little to make room for him. May I see, little one? She turned the notebook toward him. He studied the drawing for a long moment. It is a nice house, he said quietly. It has the lights on. So it does. She nodded, satisfied. Then, without looking up from her page, she said, Sir, my mama says good people always get hurt. Is that true? Adrian did not answer at once. He watched the small pink crayon move slowly across the page, filling in one more window. He thought of his father. He thought of Elena. He thought of Matteo turning his ring around his finger. He thought of Falcone, and Serrano, and Vitali, and Gennaro, and the list folded in his drawer. Then he said, quietly, Good people get hurt when they trust the wrong people, Rosie. But when they trust the right ones, they are stronger than all the bad people put together. She thought about this. Her crayon paused above the page. Stronger than the man with white hair? Stronger than all of them? She nodded, slowly. She seemed pleased with the answer, the way she was always pleased with answers that fit properly into the small, careful shelves inside her head. She set the pink crayon down, chose the yellow one, and began to color in another window. Then, after a moment, still without looking up, Sir, do you trust me? Adrian turned his head. She lifted her small face at last. Her eyes were enormous in the apricot light. There was no calculation in them. There was no plan. There was no small hidden thing waiting behind the question. There was only a child, on a marble floor, at the end of a long day, asking an ordinary question and holding a yellow crayon. Adrian looked at her for what felt like a very long time. 3 years he had answered that word with silence. 3 years he had answered it with a shake of the head or a change of subject, or a hand that gently moved away. 3 years. He nodded once. Yes, Rosie, I trust you. And for the first time since a corner in a street called Via San Carlo, he felt the words settle inside his chest as something true. Sometimes the salvation of a grown man arrives through the eyes of a child who has not yet learned to write her own name. 3 days before the engagement, the wine cellar beneath the east wing of the Morelli estate received 4 visitors it had not received in a decade. They arrived one at a time, at intervals of 11 minutes, each through a different door of the house. Falcone came first, in from the vineyard road. Serrano followed, entering through the kitchen service passage. Vitali walked in through the chapel garden, keeping to the shadow of the cypresses. Old Gennaro came last, moving slower than the others, his cane tapping softly against the stone stairs. Matteo met each of them at the cellar door. He took their phones. He took their earpieces. He gave each man a hand, then a nod, then the space to walk down alone into the vaulted stone chamber below. Adrian was waiting at the far end, A single oil lamp burned on the long oak table. The bottles behind him, hundreds of them, some older than his father, watched from their racks in silence. He did not sit. He waited until all 4 men had filed in. Then he closed the wooden door himself and turned the iron key. "There are no cameras in this room," he said. "There are no phones. There is no record of this meeting. What is said here dies here. What you decide here is the last thing you will decide in your lives, or the beginning of a great many more decisions. Choose before I speak. If any of you wish to walk out." None of them moved. Adrian placed the recording device on the table. He set the printed documents beside it. He played Vanessa's voice into the still, cold air. He set the death list at the center of the table where the light of the lamp fell on it. Falcone read it first. His jaw tightened. Serrano read second. He did not speak. Vitali crossed himself. Old Gennaro read last, took a slow breath through his nose, and folded the paper in half with the same care he had once used to fold Adrian's father's coat on the day of the funeral. Then, without a word between them, the 4 men lowered themselves to one knee on the cold stone floor. Each of them drew a small folding knife. Each pressed the blade lightly to the inside of his own left palm, drawing a single thin line of red. Each raised the bleeding hand. "On our blood," said Gennaro, and the others echoed him. Adrian did not stop them. He accepted the oath the way his father had accepted such oaths, with a nod and with silence. Then he assigned the roles. Falcone would hold the north door. No one in, no one out. Once the moment came, Serrano would control the projection screen and the speakers of the great hall on Matteo's signal. Vitali would be the man who reached Dante Russo. Gennaro, the oldest and steadiest, would move among the guests, keeping the innocent ones calm and out of the line of fire. Matteo was given the hardest line. 3 of Dante's own men, embedded in the outer security ring, were to be turned before the ceremony. He had a name for each of them. He had a lever for each of them. He would use both. The plan had a name, the mirror. They would reflect back, exactly and without addition, everything the other side had written. When the enemy has already written the script, Adrian thought, the only way to win is to let them perform it, all of it, right up until the very last scene, and then quietly, at the final curtain, change who is playing the ending role. Vanessa began to sense it on the second day. Nothing she could point to, nothing she could name aloud to her father in the small, careful phone calls she made from the terrace of her villa. Adrian was still perfect. He still kissed the inside of her wrist when she offered it. He still asked about the wedding dress. He still nodded gravely when she showed him the sample of white peonies the florist had sent over. He still touched her hair the way he had touched it a month ago. And yet, there was a stillness in his eyes now that she did not remember from before, a quiet that was not the old quiet. She had watched men for many years. She had learned to read the small shifts in the way they held their shoulders, in the way they set their coffee cup down, in the exact half-second before they laughed. Something in Adrian had moved. She did not know what, and she did not like that she did not know. On the 3rd morning, she drove to the estate unannounced. She let herself in through the east door. She spoke to no one on her way. She climbed the marble stairs, crossed the long hallway, and pushed open the door of the study without knocking. Adrian was at his desk, reading a letter. He looked up without surprise. His face did not tighten. He set the letter down as though he had been expecting her for hours. "Kara," she smiled. She let her heels click gently on the floor as she crossed the rug. She was halfway to him when her eye caught the movement in the corner of the room. Rosie was seated on the low velvet ottoman by the window, her legs folded beneath her, the violet notebook open in her lap. She was drawing something in slow, careful strokes with the pink crayon. Vanessa stopped, only for a fraction of a second. Then she resumed her walk and lowered her small clutch onto the corner of the desk. "She is here often, this little one?" Adrian did not glance at the child. He answered as though it were the most ordinary question in the world. "Her mother works. She has no other place to sit." Vanessa turned. She lowered herself with slow grace onto the ottoman beside Rosie, angling her body toward the child, letting the soft warmth of her voice fill the space between them. "You draw very beautifully, sweetheart. Will you show me?" Rosie did not answer at once. She closed the notebook with both hands. She did not close it quickly, the way a startled child might. She closed it slowly, deliberately, the way a very small clerk closes a very important ledger at the end of the day. Then she lifted her eyes to Adrian. She did not look at Vanessa. She looked past her, straight to him, and waited. Adrian met the child's gaze for the space of one breath. Then he said gently, "She is shy, Kara. Do not trouble yourself." Vanessa smiled, unhurried, and rose. She smoothed the front of her dress. She said something light about lunch, and something lighter still about the color of the peonies. She walked to the door. At the door she stopped. She turned, and for perhaps 4 seconds, she looked back at Rosie. quietly, without smiling. Then she left. A predator, Adrian thought as the door clicked shut, always recognizes another predator, even when the other one is 3 years old. That night, just after 10, a soft, frantic knock struck the study door. Adrian opened it himself. Clara stood in the hallway, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other still holding a folded dish towel she had forgotten to set down. Her face was the color of paper. "Sir, forgive me. I would not disturb you so late unless—" "Come in." She stepped inside. The words came out of her in a small, controlled rush, the way a woman speaks when she has been rehearsing them all the way up the stairs so she will not weep before she finishes. "There was a man at the gate this afternoon. Around 4, Rosie was in the courtyard by the fountain. She was playing with the stones. I was folding sheets in the laundry room and I did not see him. Marco at the South Post saw him. He was in a black car. He was taking photographs, sir, of my little girl." Adrian did not answer at once. He walked past her to the desk, picked up the internal phone, and dialed 2 digits. Matteo answered on the first ring. "Southgate," Adrian said. "4 this afternoon. Black car. I want the plate." "I already ran it, sir. I was coming up to speak with you. The plate is registered to a shipping company in the Port District. The company is a shell. The shell belongs to Marco Vitelli. Marco Vitelli was one of Dante Russo's inner drivers." Adrian set the phone down slowly. He turned to Clara. She had not moved from where he had left her. Her eyes had gone from paper to something worse. "Clara, sit down." "Sir, is my daughter. Your daughter is safe. She will remain safe. Sit down, please." She sat, only because he had asked. Adrian crossed to the side wall of the study and pressed a small carved rose in the wooden panel. A door that no visitor to this house had ever noticed swung inward, revealing a room. It was not a large room. It had a bed, a bathroom, a small kitchen, a shelf of books. The walls were reinforced. The single window was armored glass. The lights were already on because the room was checked, and dusted, and prepared, every week, without fail. He had built the room 3 years ago. He had built it for Elena. He had never brought another person to it. Until tonight. "You and Rosie will sleep here from tonight until the engagement is over. Matteo will double the inner ring of guards. Only he and I know how the panel opens. Bring her now. Take whatever you need. The rest we will send for." Clara looked at the room. She looked at Adrian. Her mouth moved once without sound. Adrian sat down opposite her. He did something he had not done with any staff member since he had inherited this house. He took her hand. "Clara, listen to me. Your daughter is helping me save this entire family. Everything I have, everything my father built, everything my grandfather bled for. From tonight, she is under my protection, as if she were my own blood. And so are you." Clara did not cry the way frightened women cry. She cried the way a woman cries when, after many years of no one seeing her, someone finally does. Silent, steady, her shoulders very still, her tears falling one by one onto the back of the hand that was holding hers. There are nights, Adrian thought, that decide who is family, not blood, not name, but who stands in front of your child when the bullets begin to fly. The night before the engagement, Adrian sat alone in the study. He had turned off every light except the small brass lamp on the desk. The great house had gone quiet in the deep way it went quiet only after midnight, when even the guards spoke in the softest of murmurs, and the clock in the front hall let its ticking be heard. On the walnut in front of him, he had laid 4 things: the small black recording device, retrieved from the drawer, the violet notebook, thick now with drawings, open to no particular page, the leather folder from Matteo, closed, its buckle worn from being reopened so many times, and the photograph of Elena, angled toward the lamp, her laughter still facing the light. 4 objects, 4 witnesses, 4 things that had brought him to the edge of tomorrow. He did not touch any of them. He simply looked, the way a man looks at his tools the night before the work begins. The door opened. He did not lift his head at first, because he already knew. Only one person in this house crossed a threshold without a sound. Rosie came in wearing a small white nightgown, her hair braided by Clara for sleep, her feet bare against the marble. She should have been sleeping in the safe room. She was not. She held something behind her back. She walked to the desk and stopped in front of him. She lifted her chin. "I came to bring you something, sir." She drew from behind her back a folded piece of paper. She placed it in his palm. Adrian unfolded it slowly. She had drawn a house again, the same large house with the yellow windows lit from within. In the doorway of the house, she had drawn 4 figures, standing close together, Adrian in the middle, taller than the others. Matteo on his right side, his shoulders broad, a small cane detail because Rosie had once seen Matteo lean on the balcony rail and mistaken it for a cane. Clara on Adrian's left, her hair down, and Rosie herself at the very front, holding Adrian's hand with one small stick figure hand. On the other side of the page, quite separate, she had drawn two more figures. A tall man with white hair, a woman in a red dress. She had drawn a set of vertical lines in front of them, dark and firm, prison bars. Adrian looked at the drawing for a long time. Then he set it down gently on the desk and reached out. He drew the child to him, and he held her. It was not a large embrace. He simply lowered his forehead against the top of her small braided head. His hand rested against her back. For the first time in 3 years, something inside his chest that had been cold began, slowly, to warm. She pulled back just enough to look up at him. "Sir, tomorrow. Are you scared?" He considered whether to lie to her. He did not. "Yes, little one, I am." She nodded, unsurprised. Then she reached into the small pocket of her nightgown and took out the pink crayon. She placed it in his hand and closed his fingers around it. "For you to borrow. It is very lucky." Adrian looked down at the small waxy thing in his palm. He nodded, unable, for a moment, to speak. A man who once had everything can lose everything, but he has never been so poor as when he has lost the ability to be believed in by a 3-year-old child. The night of the engagement, the Morelli estate blazed like a jewel on the hill. Every window was lit. 400 guests filled the great hall, the terraces, the marble staircase, spilling out onto the gardens where waiters carried trays of crystal. Every family that mattered in the city had come, every underboss, every consigliere, every quiet old man whose name was never printed, but whose word could move ports and courts. They wore black tie, they spoke in low measured voices, they watched everything. Vanessa moved through them in a dress the color of a slow flame, red silk, red lips, her hair swept up, her diamonds catching every light. She smiled at everyone. She missed no one. She walked as though the room already belonged to her. Dante Russo arrived late. He entered without hurry, his tall, thin frame in the long black coat, the white hair swept back, the ring with the coiled serpent gleaming on his smallest finger. He bent to his daughter and whispered something in her ear. She laughed softly. Adrian watched from the raised platform at the north end of the hall. At exactly 9, he stepped forward and lifted the microphone from its stand. The room quieted at once. 400 faces turned toward him. "Thank you all for coming to this house tonight." His voice was calm, warm, ordinary. The voice of a man about to become a fiancé in front of every witness that mattered. "Before I sign the inheritance agreement that many of you have traveled to witness, I would like to share a few documents, so that everyone in this room understands, with perfect clarity, what they are witnessing tonight." A small quiet moved through the crowd. Vanessa's smile did not slip, but her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne flute. The great screen behind Adrian, drawn down without a sound by Serrano, filled with light. The first image was clear. Vanessa in a red silk dress, kneeling beneath the walnut desk, her hands moving with practiced speed, the small black device pressed into place. A murmur rose in the hall. The second was her voice, filling every speaker, calm and sweet and unmistakable. "It is done. The device is placed. After the wedding, once he signs the inheritance agreement, the entire Morelli empire will belong to us. He trusts me completely." Her laugh followed. It rang through the hall like a slap. The screen changed. The list of 5 names, the Cyprus statements, 2 million a month, 7 months in a row, photographs of Dante Russo standing in the second-floor corridor of this very house, weeks ago, on days Adrian had been out of the city. And then, last of all, filling the entire screen, the crayon drawing of a small child, a tall man, white hair, black coat, a ring with a coiled serpent. Vanessa went the color of ash. Dante shot to his feet. 3 of his own bodyguards, the 3 closest to him, turned in a single smooth motion. Their weapons came up, not toward the crowd, toward him. The mirror was complete. The hall did not erupt. It froze. 400 faces understood, in the same instant, what they had just been made to witness. Adrian lowered the microphone until his voice barely carried, and yet every ear in the room heard him. 3 years ago, you killed my wife. Tonight, you meant to kill the men I trust. But there was one person you never saw, and that little girl saved us all. Invisibility, he thought quietly, is the one form of power that money can never buy. Dante Russo was not turned over to the police. He was handed to the council of Underworld heads that had witnessed everything in the Great Hall that night. In their world, betrayal of a peace signed at a long table had one price, and that price was not paid in courtrooms. He was taken from the estate before dawn. No one who mattered ever heard his name spoken again. Vanessa lost everything in a single hour. She was escorted out of the Morelli estate, still wearing the red silk dress, still in the diamonds, her heels unsteady on the gravel drive. She stopped once at the gate and looked back, waiting for a hand, for a voice, for any one of the 400 faces that had smiled at her that evening to step forward. Not one did. The gates closed behind her. The night swallowed her. 3 months passed. Spring came to the hill above the orchard, slow and gentle. The cypresses turned soft green. The rose garden bloomed in the colors it had bloomed in for 4 generations. And for the first time in 3 years, the Morelli estate began to hear a sound its walls had almost forgotten: the laughter of a child. Clara had been invited to move into the main wing. She was no longer the housekeeper. She was, quietly and without ceremony, family. Rosie had her own room now, a large sunlit room on the east side, with a small desk stacked high with paper in every color of crayon a 3-year-old girl could ever wish for. One afternoon in late April, Adrian sat on the stone bench in the rose garden. The very bench, the very corner, where Vanessa had once slipped envelopes to her father in the shadow of the white roses. He sat there deliberately. He had claimed the ground back. Rosie ran to him across the grass, barefoot, her small feet flashing beneath the hem of her yellow dress. She climbed onto the bench and pressed a fresh drawing into his hands. 3 figures, a large house, yellow windows lit from within, Adrian in the middle, Clara on one side, Rosie herself on the other, her small crayon hand holding his. Adrian looked at the drawing. Then he smiled. It was the first true smile his face had worn in more years than he could count. He understood, at last, that the person who had saved his empire was not a hired killer, not a paid consigliere, not a gun in a locked drawer. It was a 3-year-old girl the world had trained itself not to see. Dear friends, thank you for staying with this story to the end. Life has a quiet way of teaching us that the people the world calls unimportant are often the ones who see the truth most clearly. Trust placed in the right hands is stronger than any weapon, any fortune, any name carved above any gate. And sometimes the person who saves your entire life does not arrive in an expensive suit. Sometimes they arrive with a pink crayon in their hand. Now we would love to hear from you. Have you ever been saved by someone the world called unimportant? In your own life, who is the invisible person who saw what everyone else missed? Do you believe family is built by blood or by loyalty? Please share your story in the comments below and tell us where in the world you are watching from tonight. If this story touched your heart, please tap the like button, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to our channel so you will not miss the stories still to come. Every subscription is a quiet vote that helps us keep telling stories that matter. We wish you and your family peace, good health, and joy in every ordinary day. And may you always have loyal eyes beside you, even if those eyes are only 3 years old. In our next video, we will follow a cold-hearted billionaire and a young shoeshine boy who cannot read a single word, but who can read the face of every liar on the street. A story of trust, betrayal, and the smallest friend becoming the greatest ally. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of the people you love, and we will see you in the next story. Goodbye for now.